Cleopatra, the last great queen of Egypt. A figure shrouded in myths, legends, and lies created by Rome and repeated by Hollywood. Was she truly the most seductive woman in history, or a far more complex political strategist than we've been told? Today you're going to discover the strangest, most curious, and surprising facts about Cleopatra. Secrets that very few know and that will change the way you see this immortal queen. Before we continue, if you're passionate about discovering history unvarnished, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Stay until the end, because we'll reveal why her reputation was deliberately rewritten. She wasn't 100% Egyptian. When we think of Cleopatra, the first thing that comes to mind is a pure-blooded Egyptian queen. But the reality is very different. Cleopatra belonged to the Ptolemaic dynasty, a family of Greek Macedonian origin descended from one of Alexander the Great's generals. Yes, she was born in Egypt, but her lineage was foreign. In fact, she was the first of her dynasty to learn the Egyptian language to connect with her people. This means that the last great pharaoh of the Nile was not truly 100% Egyptian. Her name wasn't unique. When we hear the name Cleopatra, we automatically think of the great queen of the Nile. But interestingly, she wasn't the only one. In fact, there were several Cleopatras before her within the same dynasty. The one we remember today with so much fascination was Cleopatra VII Philopator. The name Cleopatra means, glory of her father, and it was so common in her family that it almost functioned as a repeated title from generation to generation. So the woman we know as Cleopatra was actually the seventh of her name. The queen of theatrical entrances. Cleopatra was not only a politician, she was also a master of spectacle. She knew that first impressions could change everything. A famous example, when she wanted to meet Julius Caesar, she had herself rolled up in a carpet and presented before him as if she were a living gift. The impact was immediate. Years later, with Mark Antony, she repeated the strategy on a monumental scale. She arrived on a golden ship, surrounded by purple silks, dressed as the goddess Aphrodite. A theatrical display designed to seduce, but also to command respect and power. Cleopatra understood that every encounter was a stage, and she was the absolute protagonist. She lived in Rome and caused scandal. Cleopatra didn't limit herself to ruling in Egypt, she also left her mark in Rome. After her romance with Julius Caesar, she traveled to the capital of the empire and settled in a luxurious villa near the Tiber. Her presence did not go unnoticed. For many Romans, seeing their leader accompanied by a foreign queen was an insult. The scandal grew even more when Caesar had a golden statue of Cleopatra erected in the Temple of Venus. For the Roman aristocracy, that was too much. A woman, foreign, powerful, and beside the most influential man of the Republic. In Rome, Cleopatra was not only seen as a lover, she was seen as a threat. She married her brothers. Something that seems unthinkable to us today was a tradition in the Ptolemaic dynasty. Pharaohs often married their own siblings to keep the royal bloodline pure. Cleopatra was no exception. She first married her brother Ptolemy XIII when she was just a teenager. Later, she also married another of her brothers, Ptolemy XIV. But beyond the ceremony, these marriages were only political alliances. In reality, Cleopatra always sought to exercise power alone, and she did not hesitate to confront her own brothers when they tried to take the throne from her. Dynastic incest was her cage, but also the fire that pushed her to prove she could rule on her own. Exotic beauty treatments. Cleopatra understood that image was also power. And to maintain it, she used rituals that today seem strange. One of the most famous was her bath in donkey's milk. It was said that she had dozens of animals brought to fill her tubs and immerse herself in them, aiming to keep her skin soft and radiant. She also experimented with cosmetics made from honey, oils, and minerals. For her, they weren't just whims, they were a way to project youth, strength, and almost a divine aura. Her beauty wasn't only in her genetics, it was also in a disciplined regimen of care that, in her time, was revolutionary. She wasn't as beautiful as we think. For centuries, Cleopatra has been painted as the most beautiful woman in history. But the truth is, her appeal wasn't in her physical appearance, at least not as we imagine it. Ancient coins bearing her image show her with sharp features, a prominent nose, and a defined chin. Nothing like the Hollywood actresses who later portrayed her. What made her irresistible was her intelligence, her charm, and her ability to captivate with words. Plutarch wrote that her voice, wit, and presence were so magnetic, that those who listened were captivated. More than a perfect face, Cleopatra was a human magnet of charisma and power. Her intelligence was extraordinary. Cleopatra was not only a queen, she was one of the brightest minds of her time. She spoke at least 7 languages, including Egyptian, Greek, Hebrew, and Aramaic. She mastered diplomacy, economics, history, and geography. She could negotiate with Roman generals, Greek philosophers, and Egyptian priests with the same ease. She was also the only one in her dynasty who truly embraced Egyptian culture, even appearing in ceremonies wearing traditional clothing and speaking directly to her people in their language. Her charisma captivated, yes, but it was her strategic intelligence that made her a figure impossible to ignore. She portrayed herself as a goddess. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs were not just rulers, they were seen as divine on earth. Cleopatra took this idea to the extreme. She proclaimed herself as the reincarnation of the goddess Isis, mother and protector in Egyptian mythology. In public appearances, she wore sacred symbols and participated in rituals that presented her as a divine figure. This was not a mere spiritual whim, it was a brilliant political strategy. By presenting herself as a goddess, she reinforced her legitimacy before the Egyptian people while sending a message to Rome: she was not just a queen, she was something greater, something untouchable. Cleopatra turned religion into a weapon of power. She founded a club of excess with Mark Antony. When Cleopatra and Mark Antony joined forces, it wasn't only in politics and love. They also created a very particular secret society, the Inimitables. This club was dedicated to the most luxurious and extravagant parties in Alexandria. Endless banquets, wine flowing like rivers, competitions of who could spend the most in a single night. All wrapped in an air of mystery and excess. But behind that appearance of fun, there was also strategy. It was a way to show power, wealth, and dominance to allies and enemies. At Cleopatra and Mark Antony's banquets, the opulence was so dazzling that even the Roman Empire was impressed. Owner of a perfume factory, Cleopatra was not only a queen, she was also an entrepreneur. She had a great interest in chemistry and cosmetics, and it is said that she founded her own perfume factory in Alexandria. There she experimented with flowers, oils, and resins to create unique fragrances, which she used both in daily life and in rituals and ceremonies. Some historians claim that she even wrote treatises on cosmetics, now lost after the fire of the Great Library of Alexandria. For Cleopatra, perfumes were not just a luxury, they were a form of political and personal identity. A fragrance could become a seal of power, and she knew it better than anyone. She spent a fortune on a single gamble. Cleopatra was known for her wit, and also for her extravagant challenges. Once, she bet Mark Antony that she could spend an incalculable fortune on a single dinner. He, incredulous, accepted. Then Cleopatra took one of the largest and most valuable pearls from her crown, dissolved it in vinegar, and drank it in front of everyone present. In a single gesture, she turned a jewel into the most expensive banquet in history. Roman chroniclers were both fascinated and scandalized. It was not just luxury, it was a demonstration of absolute power. Because for Cleopatra, winning that bet meant making it clear that her wealth had no limits. The mystery of her end. Cleopatra's life ended surrounded by intrigue and legend. After the defeat against Octavian, she and Mark Antony knew all was lost. The most famous version tells that Cleopatra allowed a venomous snake to bite her, granting her a death worthy of a queen. Other historians, however, believe she used a secretly prepared poison, or was even forced to end her life under Roman orders. The mystery was never solved. But the truth is that her departure marked the end of an era, with her went the last great pharaoh of ancient Egypt. An ending shrouded in shadows, and an aura of immortality. Her legacy and defamation. After her death, the Roman Empire did everything it could to erase Cleopatra's true image. They portrayed her as a manipulative witch, a dangerous woman who had bewitched Caesar and Mark Antony. In Roman works, she was called a harlot, a sorceress, and even blamed for Rome's downfall. It wasn't history, it was propaganda. A campaign to justify the conquest of Egypt and weaken the memory of her power. But time restored her greatness. Today we know Cleopatra was not just a myth of seduction. She was a strategist, diplomat, scientist, and leader who challenged an empire. Her legacy is that of a woman who, despite defamation, continues to shine as one of the most fascinating figures in history. Cleopatra was not just the last pharaoh of Egypt. She was a woman who turned politics into art, seduction into strategy, and intelligence into her greatest weapon. Beyond the legend, her story reminds us that power does not always lie in force, but in the ability to inspire, captivate, and endure. Cleopatra lived surrounded by myths, and died becoming one of them. But the most surprising thing is that, more than 2,000 years later, we are still talking about her. Because empires fall, but symbols never die. If these facts about Cleopatra surprised you, imagine what you'll discover in the next videos. History is full of secrets, intrigues, and characters as fascinating as this queen. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and share this video with your friends who love history. Together, we will continue revealing the mysteries of the past that changed the world.